We are suffering in this country from a profound deficiency in our education system that has not taught people about slavery.
Right.
And has not taught people about Jim Crow. Has not taught people about racial oppression. It's covered it over.
Right.
And we are reaping the whirlwind as a result of this kind of blindness to our history. We are history deprived.
Right.
And I think that is much of what's going on today.
Unreroute the rivers.
Welcome to Confronting Whiteness, Testimonies of Transformation, hosted by Reverend Ben Boswell of Charlotte, North Carolina. This podcast shares the stories of real people whose lives have been changed through the Confronting Whiteness journey, a program of spiritual formation and anti-racist practice that helps people racialized as white confront their history, privilege, and responsibility for change. Each episode offers a testimony of transformation, stories of awakening, courage, and hope that remind us what is possible when we engage in this work together. To learn more about the Confronting Whiteness course and community, please visit confrontingwhiteness.com. And now, here's this week's conversation.
Down by the river, dip your cup when your spirit's low. Clap your hands down.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Confronting Whiteness podcast. I'm here today with Dick Hester, who is a retired professor of pastoral theology from Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina. He is the co-author of Know Your Story and Lead It, The Power of Narrative in Clergy Leadership. In 1987 and 88, he led the Southeastern Seminary faculty in opposition to the fundamentalist control of the school. He completed his career as a senior therapist at Triangle Pastoral Counseling in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he established the Narrative Therapy Seminar. Dick retired from TPC in 2012, and the Narrative Therapy Seminar has continued under the leadership of Jack McKinney and is now in its 26th year. Dick has a new book coming out, Theological Education in a New Key, Narrative, Belonging, and Diversity, which has been published by Whip and Stock in their Cascade imprint. And Dick has also been a personal mentor of mine for over a decade. And so it is a real thrill, Dick, to have you on the Confronting Whiteness podcast tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I know a lot about you, Dick, but not everybody else does. And so I want to start back in the beginning with your religious background and racial formation as a child. How did it all begin for you?
Well, I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. I went there as a child. I moved there when I was 7, and I grew up there. I was an active member at Sagamore Hill Baptist Church in Fort Worth, which was a fundamentalist church, a kind of fundamentalism that is different than what we see today.
Mm-hmm.
Under the tutelage of Fred Swank, who was my pastor and who cared for me and cared so much for me that when I got ready to go to college, he personally took me to Baylor University to get enrolled.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So that's where it all started. Fort Worth's a highly segregated town. I had virtually no contact with, almost no contact with Black people. I'll cite 2 events that I think were decisive in revealing something about my racial experience and background. One was, I may have been 9 years old, and I was tailing the Black man that was working in our yard. His name was Ben Cole, and he seemed ancient at the time. He was probably in his 30s or 40s, but I liked him a lot, and I was following him around, and he said something to me, which I didn't understand. And so I said, "Sir," to get him to repeat it. And he did. And a little while later, my mother called me into the house and she said, "We don't say sir to Negroes."
Hmm.
Okay. I can accept that. I didn't ask any further questions.
Hmm.
So that's one event. The second event occurred in Gulfway, Texas, which was the town my parents grew up in, 90 miles due west of Waco, Texas, an all-white town of about 1,200 citizens. And somewhere, I don't remember what the context was, but I do remember it occurred in Gulfway. I was told Black people do not spend the night in Gulfway.
Hmm.
And later, much later on, was to learn that Gulfway was one of thousands of towns in mid-America that did not permit Black people to spend the night. And it was either encoded directly with signs, or it was assumed, and Black people who knew what was good for them would not spend the night in one of these towns.
Hmm.
So I had those two experiences that that help that I go back to as a reference point for understanding what it meant to be white. I was my parents were white, grew up in an all-white town that did not permit Black people to spend the night, and I was admonished by my mother about the way you treat Black people. You do not act toward them as if they are white. They are different and they are inferior. You do not use respectable language to address them like sir. So that is that's my background. My childhood was shaped by this fundamentalist religion, which was not, I did not experience it as oppressive as I would today, but I experienced it, it was home. I mean, this was home to me. My personality was significantly shaped by that church, and I was somebody in that church. And it was out of that context that I decided to go into the ministry.
Wow.
And as I said, the pastor of the church took me to Baylor University to get me enrolled. Now, later on, that first year, I was a student at Baylor. He came to the campus to have dinner with me and two other young people from that church, Charlene White and David Strong, and we ate at this nice restaurant. He had us there for dinner, and I began to tell him about some things that I was learning that that were exciting to me. I don't remember the details, but they were at odds with a strict fundamentalist view of reality. He didn't like it at all, and he cut me off emotionally. He would have nothing more to do with me, and that lasted for years. That I was an outcast because I did not toe the line with his fundamentalist view, and it was very painful to me. And I spent a lot of my time, a lot of emotional time in my head, particularly while I was in seminary, studying in seminary, doing battle with him in my head. I couldn't turn it off. But it was an all-white battle. It was white guys doing battle with each other. There was no blackness in it. And so I went to Baylor, which was segregated, all white. Graduated from there and went to Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, which was virtually all white. And I did a BD degree there and a THD, which became a PhD there, and it was practically all white. So there I was, And then when I finished the seminary, I got a job as the pastor of Parkview Baptist Church in Gainesville, Florida, in 1967.
Wow.
And I don't know how many people hearing this will recognize what was happening in 1967, but the United States was erupting in racial conflict. And Gainesville was no exception. Gainesville was approximately 40% black. Well, and here I was, pastor of what was an all-white church in Gainesville, and I had to deal with that. I'm going to take a couple of pills to keep my restless leg quiet.
Sure.
So,
I'll pause it.
There'll be a brief pause for me going to Parkview Baptist Church. The Pulpit Committee said they had been concerned about race and that they had dealt with the race issue by having an agreement that that black people would be accepted if they presented themselves for membership in the church.
Okay.
But they would have to be interviewed to be sure that they were not there. The implication was to be sure they were not going to cause a problem. White people who presented themselves for membership, of course, would not be interviewed. And I let that stand. I didn't challenge it, and was to learn, and not too long, that the race issue was by no means settled in that congregation. So I preached a sermon from Amos that summer because I was reading in the news what all was going on. Detroit, Los Angeles, I can't name all the other places where racial tension was producing riots and people were getting killed right and left. And so I preached from Amos, preached about that the waters of justice had been dammed up and they had broken loose. And the riots were an expression of this judgment that was falling on these cities. The man that was the chair of the pulpit committee that called me to the church, his wife looked at him, I heard, when I finished that sermon, and he looked back at her and said, "Marvelous," But he was, I'm sure, in the minority of people who thought that was a wonderful sermon. I ventured forward to try to engage our congregation with a black congregation at Mount Carmel Baptist Church. Thomas Wright was the pastor. He was the president of the NAACP for Alachua County. And he had led, I didn't know this at the time, but 2 years earlier, he had led a group that brought a lawsuit against the school board to integrate schools.
Mm.
And his daughter, Levon, had been the only Black person to enroll in a high school senior class.
Wow.
And she was treated very abusively in that class. I didn't know any of this at the time. I only learned it later. But that was sort of the background of what was going on. Tom never told me about this.
Mm.
But he and I worked together, and we did some cooperative efforts together. And my first real test, I think, came when I got, there was a community. I don't know how far you want to go with this, but I'm
Keep going. Yeah.
staying with it. But the spring after I came in the summer, the following spring, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
Mm.
And my wife and I and one church member marched in a memorial march that Sunday.
Mm.
And out of that came the formation of an anti, how do we call it, an anti-racial community organization called the Coordinating Council of Concern.
Mm.
And to my utter surprise, I got appointed to be chairman of the Committee on Racial Discrimination.
Whoa.
I thought, what on earth? How did this happen? I did not try to get this job. I was assigned to it.
Yeah.
And I wondered, what am I going to do with this?
Hmm.
And I didn't have to wait long, because within a short period of time, an employee of Sunland Training Center, who that was a large, very large state school for people who were mentally handicapped.
Mm.
And this man was a barber. He was a Black barber at this training center at Sunland. And he came to see me and he said, I'm coming to you because you're chair of this committee, and there are abuses going on at Sunland of the Black employees. One of the abuses was that Black employees could not get promotions. They would apply for a position, and it was always a white person that got it, even though they were well qualified. And he said the man that ran the cafeteria made usurious loans to the employees, and then when they got paid, he would cash their paychecks and take his share of the money out of their paychecks and give them what was left.
Wow.
And those were two glaring examples. And I told him, I said, something needs to be done, yes, but we need documentation for this.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just have hearsay. We've got to have hard evidence. Well, this man set about and dug out, and I wish to God I had a copy of the kinds of documents that he came up with. But he brought these together, and we put them together in a notebook.
Wow.
And Claude Kirk was the governor. Claude Kirk's the first Republican governor since Reconstruction in Florida. And he was a segregationist, but he was concerned about racial issues, and he appointed the African-American coach at Florida A&M, to go to different places in the state to check on where there may be racial problems.
Interesting.
And so I made contact with him and asked him if he would meet with people in Gainesville, and he said he would. And I talked with the barber from Sunland and said, "Can you round up several people to come and talk to him?" And he did, and they're taking the risk. But there were about 8 of them, about 8 people, and the barber, and me, and the coach. And we sat, and they told him the stories, and they were. I wish I had a recording, but they told him the truth, the unvarnished truth about what was going on in Sunland. And then at the end of that interview, we handed him the notebook. And that was the end of the meeting. Well, it was, I don't know, 2-3 weeks later, I got a call from the barber, and he said, something's going on. He said, the guy that runs the cafeteria has been fired. And he said, now there's a black person on the grievance committee of Sunland. And black people have actually seen some promotions. And so, there was it wasn't a grand change in the, this was an institution well set in its ways, its white ways, but something had moved.
Yeah.
And I give credit to this barber who had the courage to do what he did and risked getting fired, if not being prosecuted,
right,
for what he had done. So that is a setup of my experience in Gainesville, Florida, and the other thing that I would mention is that I thought it would be a good idea to foster improved racial relations, to have an interracial pulpit exchange. And so I made arrangements with, I didn't discuss this with the deacons or anybody else. I just did it. And I made arrangements with the Methodist minister, black Methodist minister. He was going to come to our church, and then I would go to his church. Well, we had a deacons meeting shortly after the news of this arrangement got out. And and it was I was surprised at the anxiety and anger about this. In fact, when the man who had been chairman of the pulpit committee and was a real ally of mine, he said an alarming number of people are upset about this interracial pulpit exchange. And later, after the meeting, a young deacon told me, he said, you need to remember his wife can become an alarming number of people. So,
that's good.
And the chair of the deacons and another deacon said, we quit, and they resigned and walked out. And I pondered this years later as I reflected on it. Why was an interracial pulpit exchange, which seemed to me a mild effort, racial?
Sure.
Why was that such a charged event? And my conclusion was that it was a visible violation of caste. You would have a black minister filling the pulpit at a white church, which was a violation of caste. And it was different than the other kinds of things that we were doing.
Right.
because it was such a visible affront to caste. So anyway, those are the things that had come to my mind about my and then what happened then after I left Parkview Baptist Church. I went to be professor of pastoral care at Phillips Seminary, which then was in Enid, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I later on went to Southeastern Seminary.
Yeah.
Both of those schools were all white. And so I was enveloped again with whiteness. And with one exception, that the dean at Phillips Seminary had met and had a conversation with, perhaps a few drinks with, the president of the Black Seminary, and they decided that it would be a great idea to exchange students, one student each, that they would send a Black student to our school, and we would send a white student to their school. And so we got a student, I've called him Wendell. Wendell showed up at our school, sent by his father, who was the president of the school.
Yeah.
And he was not interested in a theological education and didn't want to be there in the first place. And I was assigned to be his faculty advisor. And I did not know what to do with him. And in our exchanges, he said, I think you need to come and see something of the Black community.
Yeah.
And I said, all right. Thinking perhaps he was going to take me to a Black church or two. But no, he took me to Black nightclubs, telling me how dangerous it was for me as a white guy to be in a Black nightclub. Yeah. And so, and he let me know, I'm your guardian. So do whatever I say. So I went and did that, participated in that. And I have very few other memories about him, except I have been haunted lately by my memory of him. I think, to put it theologically, I think God sent me Wendell as an emissary to awaken me to the Black experience once again in all of my whiteness, and I couldn't go with it.
Wow.
I never invited him to our home. I never had a meal with him. And I look back on that and I think, my God, how it's just a picture of how really white I was, and how I avoided, as best I could, real engagement with women. And I feel very sad about that.
Yeah, there's a commonality in that story with others who have told me, they grew up with a Black friend, and then suddenly that friend was not allowed to come to their birthday party, or not allowed to come just for the sleepover at the house, or was abruptly moved to a different school, or told they were not allowed to play with them. And so it's very troubling to look back and to think about the ways in which segregation harmed everyone, including white folks.
Everybody.
Even though there were some material benefits to it for white communities, it harmed everyone as it deprived us of each other's presence. And that segregation is interesting to me, how you had these sort of moments where you were immersed in a different kind of community, but then again, kind of pulled out and back into
exactly right.
Kind of an extreme whiteness afterwards.
Right. And of course, we'll get into the story of how this extreme whiteness played itself out.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. Let's get into that. I know your story, but you had a career as a professor, as a pastor, as a professor, as a therapist.
Yep.
And you've written a number of books, and you
Well,
created.
it's not a number, it's two.
You've written 2 books, and hey, that's still two more than a lot of folks. And yet, in your later adult life, you've had these tremendous experiences of transformation around race. Talk us through what's that experience been like for you?
Well, you are right in the middle of it. I became your consultant
Yeah.
at Myers Park Baptist Church, and I don't know what year it was that you started the "What Does It Mean to Be White" program. What year was that?
Late 2019, but I had been
2019.
kind of working on it since probably mid 18.
Yeah. Okay. But we started our work together when you first came to
Yeah,
Myers
that
Park
would be
Baptist.
16. Yeah.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we got together, and then I, as we did our work together and met on a regular basis, I began to learn that you were working on this, working with groups of what does it mean to be white, and so I signed up for one of those groups, and in that group, I'm exposed to. For the first time, really, to Black authors, to Black films that are directed by Black film directors, um, um, reading about reading Black authors,
Yeah.
and that's new. That's all new to me, um, and uh, and so as this progresses, meanwhile. I have been writing a book, uh, the title of which was the inner textbooks of students and their teachers, and I've come to the point where I'm beginning to look for a publisher of this book. This happens to coincide with me being involved in what does it mean to be white. The coincidence of those two things, me trying to get a book published and me participating in what does it mean to be white, was a volatile mix. Because from being immersed in these Black authors and these Black film directors and seeing these Black films, I had to say, well, the book that I have written
Mhm.
is all white.
Wow.
Every bit of it, from beginning to end, it is all white. When it ignores 400 years of racial slavery and oppression, that's not even mentioned anywhere.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, hell, I can't, I can't, I can't publish this book. And so I had to set about, and what am I going to do with it?
Right.
Well, I decided that I would start in at the beginning, and I would go through the book and see where the issue of race should have appeared and didn't.
Wow.
And that's what I did. And so the book became and becomes and is a confessional.
It is.
This is what I didn't. This is what I didn't know. This is what I didn't understand. Uh, I was blind to this. And in the book, I talk about Wendell, you know, and I say, um, I God sent me Wendell, and I wasn't able to make the most of it. And so, uh, thanks to you, and what does it mean to be white? I rewrote the book. The basic issues there, educational issues, have remained much the same, but they have a totally different cast, so to speak, to them than they did. So
Well, I'm
that's
still apologetic for causing you to have to write your book all over again. But I think
well,
it's out
actually,
rather spectacularly, to be honest.
actually, I am so profoundly grateful for it. Otherwise, I might have gotten the thing published, and then I would just be ashamed of it.
Right. And now it's something that you can be very, very proud of because it has a strong confessional perspective to the entire book. And I would encourage folks who are listening to this podcast to pick it up if you can and take a look at it, because it really demonstrates much of what the course Confronting Whiteness is about, which is to give people the opportunity to do deep reflection about the formation of their racial identity and how it's impacted every aspect of their life, including their work, which you were able to. I think one of the things that was so surprising to me is how quickly you realized that. I mean, some people it would have taken them a long time to realize, and also would have been very stubborn about the work that would be required of rewriting a book, and would not have done it. But I thought you discovered it rather quickly, and kind of turned on a dime. It was that transformational to you.
Well, it was like there's no place to hide.
Yeah.
That was it. I one of the pieces of the book I had students in one chapter of the book identify their earliest 3 childhood memories and relate them to a parable of Jesus. And I thought, well, I need to take my turn with this. And so I didn't go to my earliest childhood memories, but I went to this memory and related this to the parable of the leaven. And the memory is this. My mother was a performer. She loved to perform, and she was very good at it. She did book reviews, which, though, what that means is a book review in that day and time was she reads a book and commits it largely to memory and then tells the story of the book to an audience. And it's usually a novel, and it's usually humorous. And she's really good at it, And so she was doing that a lot. Well, she also wanted to teach me how to do it. So as a child, I don't know how old I was, maybe 8 or 9. She had me memorize this sketch, and it's a Black woman who finds out that her young son, William, has stolen a watermelon. And she gives him the riot act for having stolen this watermelon telling him how bad that is and how awful it is to be a thief, and how ashamed he should be, and goes on and on. And then she says, okay, now we're going to cut the watermelon open.
Mm.
And she cuts it open and finds out it is green. And then she turns the tables on William and tells him how dumb he is for stealing a green watermelon. Don't you know how to tell when a watermelon is ripe, when it's green? And she goes on and on about that. And I'm doing this in this skit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing her part without being dressed like her. And that's the skit. It is a skit that is appropriate for a minstrel show.
Yeah, right.
Where white people dress up as if they are black people, and put on a show that makes fools out of black people.
Right.
Which is what this skit does. It makes a fool out of this woman,
And the child.
and the child. And I say in the parable of the leaven is the parable of how something impure is held up as something of value, and how how did I put it at the final analysis? William and his mother and me and my mother all end up together in the solvency of the leaven of this parable.
Wow.
We're all together. All of us are together. And so, there it is again.
It's so interesting that you've brought that up, and I know you talk about this, or at least reference to it a couple of times in the book. But you have this concept of the inner textbook that both the facilitator, professor, teacher, and the student bring to every conversation, every interaction, every academic moment. It seems to me like you discovered in your work of going back that whiteness is itself operating as an inner textbook.
Yeah, oh, it is. It is the whiteness. For me, characterized my inner textbook, even through my experiences at Parkview Baptist Church. I was dealing with race and interracial collaboration without recognizing I was white.
Yeah, right.
I didn't see that. I did not see that I was white. And I didn't see I was white until your program showed it to me, helped me to see my whiteness and to see that my inner textbook was all white.
I think it's
room.
Yeah. It's so helpful to think about it that way, because it really peels back the layers in showing us how whiteness is a kind of racial formation that we experience. It's not right. It's not biological. It's not natural. It's not inherited. It's not this thing that we get. It's something we're formed in, and we're formed into it in a whole host of ways that are very difficult to describe sometimes, because it's really just the air that we breathe, the water we swim in. You mentioned your church. So you have a church. You mentioned your home life with your mother's training.
Right.
I'm sure your father also had something to do with your racial formation as well. The community was all white, so that in and of itself is a kind of formation.
Oh my, yeah.
And then deeply trained in the things of whiteness with no contrast, right?
That's right.
And
if I'd been in the deep South,
yeah,
it would have been different. It would have been different
right.
agenda. But I was in a part of the country that permitted me to live an all-white existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking about that that inner textbook and the ways in which we have to go back now when we do this work, and we have to go back and to exegete those stories differently, sort of how you have. I've thought
Yeah.
about stories in my life that I once thought of were quite positive examples of racial engagement or
Mhm.
racial cooperation or relationship and interracial relationships. And I look at them quite differently now, and then there were stories that I forgot, sort of the way the one that you had as a child haunts you. And I think part of our work is to go back and to really reinterpret those stories with an understanding of whiteness that we now have.
Yeah, yeah. That's my book is all about that.
Exactly.
It
Which
is
is
all.
why I highly recommend it to folks. Well, in addition to forcing you to rewrite your entire, manuscript over again, are there other ways that you would describe the transformational experience that you had in going through the course? I mean, that's a pretty big change, rewriting a book. But are there other ways that you've seen transformation?
Well, yeah. Um, I I wrote something here that may be appropriate for that, um, and that is um, my response to the current administration of Donald Trump.
Hmm.
Um, Donald Trump is an epitome of whiteness run amok, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he is it was described by an earlier article in the Atlantic as the first white president.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do battle with him all the time over racial issues.
Yes.
And I wrote this. I never published this, but I wrote it, and it is. It tells you really. It's my pledge of resistance.
Let's hear it.
In response to my faith in God, I adopt a vocation of resistance to actions by Donald Trump as president that I believe to be against God's will and purpose, as revealed in the scripture of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. I will resist his every attempt to disregard and violate the constitutional limits of the office of president. I will resist his efforts to promote Christian nationalism and white supremacy.
Hmm.
I will resist his abuse of minorities, the poor, and LGBTQ persons. I will resist his efforts to restrict reproductive rights for women. I will resist his efforts to arrest, detain, imprison, and deport from this country 11.7 million undocumented persons. That figure is actually much higher. I will resist through political engagement, writing, publishing, teaching, and poetry. I will resist by prayer and study and teaching about Jesus' challenge to the corrupt and abusive political system of first century Judea.
Hmm.
And
Powerful.
that's, although it's not published, it represents what
It's a manifesto. It's a
yeah. It's a manifesto.
It's a creed.
Yeah.
It's a creed for these times that we face right now.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty scary time, I'd say.
It's very scary.
DC having been, there's such a, I'm sure you're picking up on it, and I know others are as well, but there's so many both overt and implicit racial overtones or overtones of white power and white supremacy to every policy decision.
Every
right?
policy.
The anti-wokeness, the anti-DE&I stuff, all the picking and choosing predominantly black cities run by black mayors. We're going to send federal troops into LA, Chicago, New York. The explicit targeting of immigrants of color, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's not a bunch of Polish immigrants getting sent back to Poland, right?
No.
It's not, it's very specific to a particular racial identity in American life that's being targeted through ICE. And you've lived through quite a bit, having pastored in the midst of the civil rights movement. And I wondered if you, as we come to a conclusion of our time, could help to frame historically this moment for us in relationship to the experiences that you've had in your life in American history. How would you compare, if you can, or frame this particular moment for folks?
Well, one way I would frame it is that we are suffering in this country from a profound deficiency in our education system that has not taught people about slavery.
Right.
And has not taught people about Jim Crow. Has not taught people about racial oppression. It's covered it over.
Right.
And and we are reaping the whirlwind as a result of this kind of blindness to our history. We are history deprived.
Right.
And I think that is much of what's going on today. And it is such a deep problem that the remedy is not easy. It is not an easy one at all.
It's not simple.
People don't want to hear about slavery. They, and Trump wants to stamp out any effort to communicate about that.
Tell any truthful history about America because he doesn't want white people to feel guilty.
Yeah, well, and that would undermine his program, which is a program of white supremacy and the preservation of the fortress of white supremacy at all costs. Yeah. So to say that's my main response to your question, and that is to say we're suffering from a terrible historical deficit, and it has to be corrected in some way or another.
Yes,
I don't know how, but also Trump is and the Republicans are undermining the very possible remedies of that in killing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Yeah, and NPR, right, which is a subsidiary.
Yeah, there is the public. That is the public media through which many people have learned about race, and it's now being undermined by
I
Trump.
think there's that old quote from Jefferson, an interesting character to quote at this moment, but who says that a democracy depends on an informed electorate. And right now we have the most uninformed electorate in American history, which is ironic in so many ways because we have access to more information in a variety of ways at our fingertips than ever before in human history. And yet we are the least informed.
Well, and so much of that is misinformation.
Right, because there's lots of misinformation. And that's where I think, Jefferson probably couldn't have anticipated the rise of propaganda, which we know of in Nazi Germany, and also now through media outlets like Fox News and other places that just simply twist the facts and manipulate information in ways that people take as credible. And therefore, we have this massive information gap, a problem where certain segments of the population have so little truthful information and are then have been emboldened in denying even the reality of that information. And that continues to seem to be like the symptom of whiteness. It's again, back to the whiteness.
Back to whiteness. Yeah.
Well, Dick, are there any final words, parting words you want to offer our folks about confronting whiteness or your experience of race that you would offer as a recommendation or maybe words of hope?
Well, every day I ask myself that question.
Yeah.
And the word of hope is that God is not through with anything yet.
Amen.
And that as I look back at the life of Jesus, it's clear to me that Jesus was not the leader of a massive movement.
Mm-hmm.
He was a peasant, and
Yep.
he was leading a peasant movement.
That's right.
And it would appear that such a man in such a time leading such a group would totally disappear from history.
Yes.
But that has not occurred.
That has not occurred.
That has not occurred. And God is still at work. And look for the small evidences of God at work.
Wow.
That's my word.
I love it. I think we'll end on that. Dick, thanks so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for inviting me, and it's been a delight. I enjoyed every minute of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Unreroute the rivers, let the dam.
Thank you for listening to Confronting Whiteness, Testimonies of Transformation with Reverend Ben Boswell. We invite you to learn more about the course and the community by visiting confrontingwhiteness.com. There you can explore resources, register for a group, and find ways to deepen your own journey. We also encourage you to get involved, nominate someone or even yourself to share a testimony on this podcast or sign up to volunteer. If you are a past participant, consider becoming a group facilitator. Together we can cultivate courage, hope, and transformation.
The water won't even make mud. Now after it comes, it might come with a steady flow. Grab the roots of the tree down by the river, dip your cup with your spirit's low. Clap your hands now.